today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle, and this is our inauguration special live stream. The inauguration is to take place in 2 hours' time, and this is part of the events that have been organized. So the schedule, like a church service, that's already taken place, and then there's the Gaggle, and then there'll be other events subsequent to that. So obviously, Trump is extremely exuberant. If you watch the rally in the sports arena yesterday, he's flying high. Um, huge victory, and really there's virtually no opposition to him. I mean, it's that what happened on January the 20th, 2017. Now seems like a distant memory that somehow people regarded him
Well,
as a usurper,
George,
a Putin puppet, or whatever. Yeah.
You mentioned the festivities of last. I guess it was last night when we had the Village People singing the iconic song. I'd like to point out to our viewers is that when that song came out, it was unofficially, it was unsaid, but that was kind of a gay national
Yeah,
anthem.
very much so.
Just think about that, okay? And it has always been associated, and not in a derogatory way at all. It just objectively, okay? You have these guys, performing different masculine roles.
Right.
A cowboy, a police
Yeah, yeah,
officer,
yeah.
a hard hat, and
Yeah.
it was very much a motif for the gay community. And
Yep.
straight people love the song. Okay, I'm not trying to make a statement here about it, but have Donald Trump, being a very big man that he is, swinging his arms around with these guys singing in
With
front
his
of him.
yeah, that's right. That's
What
right.
a god!
It was a surreal moment. However, Trump is emerged from the world of New York. I mean, the late '70s, which is when I guess when that song was composed. That was the start of his rise in New York, and so it wasn't wholly
Yeah.
inappropriate. It's just that he's kind of moved to another world. But still, you remember, one remembers 1977, 78, Mayor Ed Koch, who he was said to be, people made all sorts of assumptions about him. He kind of never really either confirmed nor denied anything, but nonetheless, he was thought to be the gay mayor, very popular mayor, but again, part of that New York City world. And then, of course, YMCA. Then they had another hit song called Macho Man. So that was. What was interesting is that the people who performed yesterday, they weren't members of the original group. So I think only one of them is a member of the original.
They'd be quite elderly. I
Yeah,
mean,
that's what I was thinking. Because when they said, "Oh, the Village People will perform," I thought, "Wow, that 50 years on, and they're still capable of."
anyway, I
Performing.
don't think anybody in their right mind wants to me try to dance. Okay, that's a career breaker. Okay.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So anyway, then in 2 hours' time, he's going to swear in. We haven't seen the inaugural address, but the Wall Street Journal suggests that he's going to be talking about a revolution of common sense. So again, not at all the sort of the dark vision that he spelled out on January the 20th, 2017, in that speech written by Steve Bannon. Um, and then after that, he's going to start signing all kinds of executive orders. Now, but before he's done that, maybe we should make a mention of Biden's last minute contribution, which was his his preemptive pardons. So really, within the past hour and a half, he issued. Let's see. We can just take a look at this preemptive pardons, and we can take a look at that.
Okay, I'm getting this information cold, so go ahead.
Yeah, basically, it's what we had expected. Um, and here he says this is. Can you see this, Peter?
Not yet.
Okay, let's see. All right. Can you see this now?
Nope.
All right. Let's try again. Just not.
I saw the presentation icon lit up for
Yes,
now.
that's also I got very excited by that, but evidently, um, can you see it?
Now we can.
Now you can. Okay, so this was the statement that he issued about an hour and a half ago, and he says our nation relies on dedicated, selfless public servants every day. They are the lifeblood of our democracy. Well, not really. I mean,
Well, when it starts that way, you know it's trouble. Go ahead.
exactly. I mean, this is the permanent government, unaccountable to anyone, and basically they enjoy their permanent government in the sense that they're permanently employed. You can never fire them, unlike anyone else. Yet, alarmingly, public servants have been subjected to ongoing threats and intimidation for faithfully discharging their duties. In certain cases, some have even been threatened with criminal prosecutions, including General Mark Milley, Dr. Anthony Fauci, and the members and staff of the Select Committee to
Oh,
investigate the January 6th attack on the US Capitol. These
uh,
public servants have served our nation with honor and distinction, of heaven, and do not deserve to be the targets of unjustified and politically motivated prosecutions. And so I believe in the rule of law. No, you don't. And I'm optimistic that the strength of our legal institutions will ultimately prevail over politics. But these are exceptional circumstances, and I cannot, in good conscience, do nothing. Baseless and politically motivated investigation.
Joe Biden is using the words "I cannot in good conscience." Okay,
That's it.
really,
That's it. Yeah. Yeah.
really, wow.
Yeah, the man who unleashed the Justice Department against his political opponent. Baseless and politically motivated investigations wreak havoc on the lives, safety, and financial security of targeted individuals and their families. Even when individuals have done nothing wrong,
Well, how do
and
we know that?
of course, how do we know that?
Well, how could we possibly know that?
Yeah, that's right. And in fact, have done the right thing and will ultimately be exonerated. And
Ultimately, with a pardon, there's no such thing as
no,
ultimately being exonerated.
no, no, exactly. That's exactly. The mere fact of being investigated or prosecutors can irreparably damage reputations and finances.
Well,
Oh, now you tell us.
taking this pardon is a poison pill for your reputation.
Right.
Yes, it
But I
is.
mean, when you think about the mere fact of being investigated and prosecuted can irreparably damage reputations and finances. And how many Trump people did you investigate and irreparably damage their reputations and finances? And then that is why I'm exercising my authority under the Constitution to pardon General Milley, Dr. Fauci, the members of Congress and staff who served on the Select Committee in the U.S. Capitol, and DC Metropolitan Police officers who testified before the Select Committee.
So this is putting a bookend to will we ever know what happened on January 6th?
Right, right. Right. Well, I mean, they could still hold congressional investigations. I imagine they will, a proper congressional investigation as to what happened. But in terms of, police, I mean, obviously they're going to have to overturn that January the 6th committee, which was was a total stitch up job. I mean, their goal was to get Trump. They didn't do anything else. The issuance of these pardons should not be mistaken as an acknowledgement and any individual engaged in any wrongdoing, nor should acceptance be misconstrued as an admission of guilt for any offense.
So
Yeah.
the way I would read it is if you're explaining, you're losing. Okay, there you
Well,
go.
exactly, and that's very interesting because the argument has always been made about Nixon that when Nixon accepted the pardon, he was effectively admitting guilt. I never thought this was a convincing argument. I mean, if you accept a pardon, you basically essentially saying, "Hey, I don't want to go through this whole legal
Well,
process because
but
I
also,
know that this is going to bankrupt me, and I'm playing with rolling the dice because you never know how any legal process is going to end up."
yes, but the difference. I'm glad you bring up the pardon of Nixon because um, um, we don't know if General Milley has done anything wrong. We don't know if he broke the law. During the entire process called Watergate, we had um, justifiable reasons to believe that there were possibilities of irregularities and illegal behavior. Okay, there was never a trial. Okay, there was never a trial. That's why Nixon accepted it. But there was a process, and we were well aware. The tapes, the smoking gun, all of this stuff, all these phrases we have today, many of them come from that experience. So we knew a whole lot about the process then. We know nothing about it here because he's wiping the slate clean.
Well, wiping the slate clean, and there were all sorts of very troubling aspects of what the January the 6th committee did. Again, they destroyed evidence. There's evidence of witness tampering. In the case of Milley, there are all sorts of very, very strange events that were described in Bob Woodward's book, where basically he's going behind the elected president and engaging in communications with his Chinese counterpart, telling him, "Oh, ignore any orders that come from my president."
It's court martial.
That's exactly.
I don't need much more information than that.
Right, exactly. A very serious matter. And of course, Fauci himself, it's a very serious issue since Fauci lied right from the beginning, since he knew all about the COVID experiments that he had financed, and then just simply lied to this president by saying, "Oh yeah, it's all natural. It comes from nature." No, absolutely not. It couldn't possibly have come from a lab. I think, yeah, but you knew that this is Wuhan, and this is where the Wuhan Institute of Virology is. You knew that American money had gone there. You knew that they were engaging in these experiments on COVID. More than that, you had financed experiments that you had been explicitly prohibited from doing. The Obama administration said we don't want to do these kinds of experiments because they're inherently too dangerous, and he got around it by doing it in another country. So he is very much culpable. So Fauci, and then Liz Cheney. So Liz Cheney, one day she gets a Presidential Medal of Freedom, the next day she gets a preemptive.
Was there a list of the pardons in this document that you showed us?
Yeah, just those. That's all. They're just these people.
Oh, okay.
But that's the list. I thought there'd be a longer list because I thought that obviously we thought that he might pardon himself, and at the very least pardon members of his family. So he hasn't done. I mean, there's still time. I mean, he's still got an hour and a half. So I mean, he's pretty much left everything to the last minute. I was expecting quite a long list of people, usually kind of Democratic Party donors who have all sorts of shady prosecutions or shady, they've been convicted in the past and now they've given them a free rein.
Well,
Trump, that's what Trump did actually in 2021. There were very shady characters that he issued a pardon to.
Yeah, but it seems to me, considering the lack of enthusiasm by the Republicans in Congress to go after the Biden family, there was never really much enthusiasm there. And so I think that the Biden calculation is that they didn't have an appetite to do it then. They're not going to have an appetite during the Trump administration. Also they have a lot of other things to do. Okay. And I think that's it. Just the kind of apathy, because power protects power, okay?
Right.
Because for every single Democrat in Congress doing, shenanigans, is a Republican as well, okay? And for me, that's extremely bipartisan.
Right. That's right. I think that's right. I always thought it was a very unlikely that they go after him. On the other hand, you never know. I mean, it's like this is your one shot to get out of it. So therefore you say, okay, if I just pass on this, am I going to regret this decision in 3 months' time when I'm told that I'm under a DOJ investigation? So, and even if he himself thinks, oh, they're not going to go after me, his brother, may not be. Jimmy Biden, who's supposed to be the brain of the family, Jimmy Biden, who's been living off Joe all these years, you might think, yeah, they might come after me. I'm not the former president. So, again, we still have time, but I thought that yeah.
Well, Hunter's he has a lot of power right now, a lot of power, because he's in the clear. He's in the clear.
Right. So anyway,
I hope his uncle, has paid up his debts.
So that part is done, and so now we're going to have the inaugural address, and then he's going to sit down. It's going to be done indoors. Now they're saying they're doing it because it's so cold, but it's not that cold. I mean, it's cold, but again, I mean, as you probably know, I mean, by Moscow standard, it isn't really that cold. Um,
A light jacket.
uh, and so that I mean, you think that there may be other considerations that they don't want to do it
Security.
out in the out.
Security.
Yeah,
Security.
exactly,
And
exactly.
and plus, they're not taking any chances. That Trump doesn't want anybody to rain on his party. Okay,
Right,
so because obviously there are going to be demonstrations. There will be demonstrations, but that's not where the focus of the
right,
attention will be. Will
right,
be indoors on the inauguration. So if it's the weather or it's protests, it's two birds with one stone.
right,
That's the way I look at it. Okay.
right. Yeah.
Look,
So
I got 4 years
yeah,
to trip them up. Okay. My,
yes,
my attitude is if it's George W. Bush, Barack Obama, give them their few hours. Okay. It's the closest thing America has to a coronation.
hmm
And, it was certified. It was certified by Congress. I mean, come on.
right.
A few hours.
Yeah, no, that's right. But so now, so the Trump program is that he's going to sign about 100 executive orders. He's not going to sign 100 today because I think his hand's going to get a little tired from signing 100. But he's going to sign quite a number. And I it's on today. I think he's going to focus on immigration. I think there's going to be a number on immigration. I think returning to the remain in Mexico policy. He's going to declare some of these international drug cartels. He's going to call them terrorist organizations. He's going to declare, I think, a national emergency at the border. And so, therefore, that's, I mean, money has to be sent to the border to, whatever, to resume building the wall, infrastructure, whatever. So, I think that's going to be done. There may well be, he may well start today issuing pardons for January the 6th defendants. He seemed yesterday at that rally. He said, "I think you're going to be very happy tomorrow. What I'm going to do on the January the 6th." He didn't say everybody's going to get a pardon, but it sounded like the overwhelming majority of defendants on January 6th will be pardoned. I don't know whether it'll be today, but I think it's going to be in the next couple of days. Um, and then there's the usual thing: you're going to start drilling for oil and so on. Yeah, coal, everything, whatever it is, if it's anywhere and it produces energy, drill for it. So that's will be a done deal. I don't know whether he's going to plan on imposing tariffs already today, but that's something that could well happen really in the next couple of days. So it's going to be quite an eventful day, um, but something that of course interests us, and we've talked about this before, which is of course Ukraine, and here we've had Steve Bannon, who has he made it really raised a shot across the bow. Let me just find this. Yes, he has given an interview at Politico, which was quite a strong um, comment apropos of Ukraine. Okay, can you see this, Peter?
Yep.
Okay, so it says here, Ukraine risks being Trump's Vietnam, says Steve Bannon. Trump's former chief strategist fears his old boss won't make a clean break and stop military aid to Kiev.
And he's absolutely right.
Exactly. Very stark. It's a very stark warning. I think
It's
this.
one of these rare occasions, everyone, where Politico has the subtitle where I have no objection. Continue, Your Honor.
So, and I think he gave this interview this morning. So it was very early. And it says Donald Trump is in danger of failing to make a clean break with Ukraine and could be sucked deeper into Vladimir Putin's war, just as Richard Nixon was stung in his attempts to pull out of Vietnam, and Trump's former chief strategist Steve Bannon warned in a wide-ranging interview with Politico. Is something that we have talked about many, many times, precisely this analogy with Nixon, that within 15 minutes of Nixon taking the oath of office, January the 20th, 1969, it was Vietnam was Nixon's war.
Yes, but the difference is, George, and we've talked about this so many times, is that Nixon had a plan
Mm-hmm.
and he implemented it. It took time.
It took a long time, but it took 4 years. Yeah.
Yes, but I think that, and considering his memoirs and people around him, he knew this was going to be a long slog,
Right.
and he achieved what he wanted. I don't think the Trump administration has
Right.
any kind of clear idea how to move forward at all.
But yes, but during those I think that's a good point. During those 4 years, those were 4 years of turmoil, 4 years of intense protests against Nixon, and indeed, for much of those 4 years, Nixon thought Vietnam was going to bring him down. He was going to lose re-election because of Vietnam, because of the unpopularity of the war. He would be punished for it. So that in the end, he won comfortably, but he didn't expect to win comfortably. And then here we have the host of the influential War Room podcast is girding for a major political showdown over United States intervention in Ukraine. He advocates ending America's all-important military aid to Kiev, but fears his old boss is going to fall into the trap being set by an unlikely alliance of the U.S. defense industry, the Europeans, and even some of Bannon's own friends, who he argues are now misguided. I think he's talking about your friend Dr. Sebastian Gorka, who is part of the Bannon circle.
Who has gone radio silent?
Yeah, but he was at the rally yesterday.
Okay.
He said, and Trump singled him out. Said, "Oh, there's a great friend Sebastian Gorka," and I have to say it's very, very troubling that Trump has selected Sebastian Gorka, because the Hungarians passed on Gorka. He offered his services to the Hungarians way back in the 90s. They didn't want to have anything to do with him. The British passed on Gorka. They didn't want to have anything to do with him, but somehow Trump has embraced him. That's not good. And then it says these include Keith Kellogg, a retired U.S. general who is Trump's pick to be special envoy to Ukraine and Russia. And then Bannon says, if we aren't careful, it will turn into Trump's Vietnam. That's what happened to Richard Nixon. He ended up owning the war, and it went down as his war, not Lyndon Johnson's.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't have phrased it. He ended up owning it. No, it was dropped on him. I mean, you sound like he's like embracing it. No,
no. It was dropped on it, but the point is that everyone forgot about it. I mean, it's like if you were around at that time, and it was just people were preoccupied with Nixon this, Nixon that, and everybody you actually patiently explain that this isn't Nixon's war. This was the Kennedy and Johnson's war. It was just dumped on his lap, but most people weren't even aware of it. They were so indignant about Nixon. And then he goes on, Kellogg argues any deal to end a 3-year-long war needs to include solid security guarantees for Ukraine to ensure Russia won't just invade again. And Kellogg has talked about maintaining U.S. military aid to apply pressure on Moscow to agree to a decent deal. Despite his friendship with Kellogg, Bannon thinks this kind of delay will only heighten the risk of the U.S. being pulled deeper into a war he believes is unwinnable, and one that isn't in America's national interest. Behind the scenes, he's lobbying furiously for Trump to declare in his inauguration speech on Monday that he will end the war quickly. I have to say, I mean, this is very smart of Bannon's, that he's getting out front with this.
Oh yeah, because he's a lightning rod for the MAGA world,
right.
And Trump knows that.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. It's one of these themes here that I think George and I are going to be returning to a lot during the first 100 days. Is MAGA going to take this? Okay, right. I mean, they thought they elected an agenda. Are they going to get that agenda? George started out our podcast here. All of these executive orders. Okay, good. He's a man of action. He's a man of surprises. but he's got to keep one of these main promises. And Bannon is, holding his feet to the fire.
Right, exactly. Yeah, this is the big one, because nothing can guarantee your agenda being derailed as a war that you simply have no idea how to extricate yourself. Forget everything else that you're trying to achieve, whether it's on immigration, dismantling the administrative state, trying to make sure that civil servants no longer have federal protection. All the rest will just simply fly out of the window when you get bogged down in this war. And then on his daily radio show and podcast, Bannon's been campaigning for this announcement on day one. I'm going nuts right now to make sure there's something on Monday, an announcement, because you have Kellogg saying it will take 100 days. The old foreign policy establishment are saying 6 months. He argues Trump should spell out to Ukrainian leader Zelensky, quote, there's a new sheriff in town, and we're going to get a deal done, and we're going to get it done quickly. Zelensky should, he goes on, take note of how Trump steamrolled Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu into accepting a ceasefire for hostages deal with Hamas. And then goes on. He was scathing about the Europeans and the transatlantic alliance. Quote, if you look at NATO, I don't think he can put together 2 combat divisions of Europeans that are ready to fight, he scoffed, complaining NATO had turned into an American protectorate rather than being an alliance. Europe has gotten away with early retirement and full health care because they don't pay for their own defense. It's very true. You should also mention the 6-week holidays that the Europeans enjoy. Very unlike the American way of life.
Yeah, well, they want to lower these hawks. They want the Ukraine to lower the conscription age to 18. But is there anybody in Europe being conscripted?
No, of course not. Of course not. No, you do the fighting. We'll hold your coat. But Bannon is equally emphatic. He's no fan of Russia's leader. Putin's a bad guy. He's a very bad guy. The KGB are bad guys. But I don't stay up at night worrying about Russian influence on Europe. Number one, their military hasn't even got to Kiev. In 3 years, they couldn't get there. They haven't taken Kharkiv yet. You know why I don't stay awake at night? Because the Europeans don't stay awake at night. They don't consider Russia a real threat. If they did, they would throw a lot more money and troops into the game. And that, of course, is the key here, which is that, if you're really, really, really afraid of Russia, how come you're not doing more about it?
This was my thesis about NATO way before February 2022, everyone. Okay. Right. I've confronted people for well over 15 years. Well, if it's such a threat, why doesn't your country, Lithuania, spend more on your defense?
Right. Yes. All right. There's just a little more that he added, which actually quite funny. And it says here, he argues too many European leaders fancy themselves as Winston Churchill, especially zeroing in on former British Conservative leader Boris Johnson, whom he called a war criminal. That's nice. And then the Ukraine war is the central screw-up of Europe over the last couple of years. You have 1 million dead or wounded Ukrainians, and we're going to end up, best case, we're going to end up exactly where this thing started, as I said 3 years ago. And it's because you have Boris Johnson, Emmanuel Macron, and all these fantasists that won't pay their own defense. They want to be big shots. They all want to be Winston Churchill with other people's money and other people's lives, says. And then Bannon and Musk are also in sharp disagreement over Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. Musk is a fan. Bannon was too until recently. For weeks, he has been launching ferocious attacks on her in interviews with Italian media, describing her as a lefty disguised as a populist. This marks a stark contrast with his original support.
Well, George and I soured on her
a long time ago.
Remember when I said they thought the critics said they thought that Mussolini had been elected, but George and I were,
exactly, and then they were pleasantly surprised. Oh, strange new respect. She now hangs out with her best friend Ursula von der Leyen. I saw in her tremendous potential. She's got the best skill set of any politician except for Trump on the globe. Tough, personable, smart. What happened is that once she got into office, she immediately became not just moderated, she flipped and gave support to the Central Powers in Brussels, and particularly NATO. And NATO is a huge problem. She was an ardent backer of the Ukraine war. And I think that's it. I mean, this
I
is
like how he called it the Central Powers of
that's the
Brussels.
central, yes, the central one. But of course, he's absolutely right here. Says NATO is a huge problem. You can't solve anything. You can't deal with any of the major problems in the world until you deal with this poisonous, cancerous entity called NATO. Because it's just it just sucks you in to conflict after conflict after conflict, and then you never get anything done. And I think Bannon sees this. So you've got to get your hands around this problem, otherwise you're going to be overwhelmed very quickly around it. That's why
Yeah,
I say don't start talking about 6 months. Start on day one.
it would be very interesting to find out how many conferences and meetings and summits that NATO has had since February 2022. It's a lot, everybody, a lot. Okay, they do a lot of talking. They
Yes,
create these memes, they create these slogans, and that's what they're all about. Russia is already lost.
yes, yes.
We heard that 2 years ago. So why is the war going on?
Yeah,
Okay,
that's
they
right.
they they work in this fantasy world. This is an alliance that built on fantasies
Right,
and hopes and
right, right.
and and gesturing. That's what this is about.
Well, it is, but it's a very dangerous alliance because it has to continually justify its existence, and you have these absolute fanatics there who are basically they run the place. I mean, America obviously provides the muscle, but it's these crazy Baltics, Poland, whoever, whether it's the party of the left, the party of the right, they absolutely the one thing they're absolutely united on is they hate Russia and they want to go to war with Russia. So they got Poland, and then of
They
course
want everybody else to go to war with Russia.
exactly they want everybody else, and then of course you've got the United Kingdom, and so when you put that together, that's the driving force, and then Maloney has provided no leadership. This new Friedrich Merz, I mean, I think he's even going to be worse than Sergeant Schultz. He's probably going to keep on. Annalena Baerbock will continue on as
We
foreign
just
minister. She's absolutely insistent, adamant to be on being foreign minister. She doesn't want to let go of that job. It's
did
her
you see
as
that
a right.
picture of Schultz trying to grab
Yes,
onto?
yes,
That was great.
she storms past him. You think, hey, she's a junior partner, and you say, well, if you looked at that, well, who comes across as the junior partner? Um, um, so that's why this is a horrible entity. Um, but it's no question. Ukraine is going to be the key to restrain and ultimately defeat the Trump presidency.
Well, also, George, I think that the Gaza ceasefire is also going to also play an important role, because at least for 16 days. Okay, and then all bets are off. Okay, all bets are off after then. He got a reprieve for his inauguration. That's how I read it. Okay, um,
Right.
and but I'm backing you up here. I mean. There's been much talk about ending the conflict in Ukraine. Now it's coming to the fore, and Steve Bannon is, he's getting ahead of the parade, and he's representing how a lot of people feel, and
Right.
it's emblematic of just these forever wars. I mean,
Right.
we're not about that. That's not who we are, and
Right.
that's going to be tested in a very harsh way.
Very harsh way, and why I think it's going to be very dangerous because I think Trump will try to do something different from Biden, and I think he may start taking very serious risks. I mean, Biden took risks, but there was a limit to where he would go. I think that Trump is going to say, well, Biden's done this. I need to take greater risks to bring this to an end. That's why I think that we could be in a very dangerous situation very quickly on Ukraine. With Israel, at least from Trump's point of view, he doesn't have a divided party on this issue, so he can just simply I mean, it may well be, but I mean, Netanyahu, who issued that statement, I think I can't remember whether it was Saturday or Sunday, saying, "Oh well, we've got we got an agreement from Biden and from Trump saying that well, if things don't go right with this ceasefire deal, we can restart the war anytime." And Trump has removed all restraints on our
Okay, well,
U.S.
it will become Trump's war.
It
Okay.
will become Trump war, but nonetheless, that was Netanyahu's statement. We don't have to believe everything Netanyahu says. I mean, that's his claim. Trump hasn't confirmed that he
Okay,
has.
but George, I mean, there's no way in any reality that I can even conceive of is that Netanyahu is going to back down. Okay, this is a respite of one form or another. Okay, he got the message from Trump. Okay, but Netanyahu, one of the worst creatures that ever crawled this earth, he is a very, very wily and very skilled
Right.
politician. He's not out. He's not down and
No,
out.
no,
Okay.
no, no, no.
They the bell has been ring. Go to your corners. Okay,
Right,
that's where we are right now.
right,
But that's going to come back to Trump as well. I agree with George. I mean, you have a media and you have the political system that is in lockstep here. But that's not going to change the framing of the conflict around the world. And Joe Biden will be quickly forgotten, and it will be Donald
right.
Trump's. And I believe, and I may be proven wrong, but I just don't think Trump wants that label around him, genocide Don. I think he really he saw the and we know over the last few days that did significantly hurt Kamala Harris in the election.
Oh yeah,
Okay,
very, very, very much so. That's right. So that was for the That's why that war is much more damaging to the Democrats than it would be for the Republicans. Republicans are much more united on the question of Israel. On the other hand, does Trump really wants this, hanging over him, for another 2 years, and of course Ukraine as well. So both wars hanging over him, because 4 years is nothing. I mean, it's like you've got 4 years. Within 18 months, he loses Congress, and then in effect, you're a lame duck president. Once you're in your
I mean
second,
the
you're a lame
lamest
duck.
the lamest of lame ducks because
Right,
he cannot. This is
right,
his last hurrah. Okay,
yeah,
I mean, I don't know how far you want to go into it, but I mean, the first phase is the next the primary hostage exchange is in the first 16 days. But look what Israel and Iran are preparing for right now.
right,
See, what I think it could be easily an expansion of the conflict, not just isolating
right,
Gaza. Anyway,
right,
how much more can you destroy Gaza? I mean,
right,
I've seen some of these images here. I mean, it's like going to the moon. All
right,
right, so
right, right.
um, and it doesn't mean the body politic of Israel is finished with this as well. They're not. They're not.
No, 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 no.
And
That's
then they'll say, "But you said you were going to get rid of Hamas." Well, Bibi says, "Well, the dance isn't over, everybody." Okay, that's what's coming out of Israel right now.
well, that's right. And then, but the problem that he has is that he says, okay, this war now 15 months, you still haven't eliminated Hamas by your own definition. Even when they were handing over these hostages, um, there were Hamas people everywhere. There they were. They were guarding these women. They had guns. They were there. So what have you been doing? I mean, you've destroyed this tiny little plot of land, and they're all still there. They're all with guns.
Well,
They're
also, George,
an active force.
I don't know how much coverage the American media, but I watch obviously all kinds of media. The condition of the three women that were released, they were smiling, they were well
They were
dressed.
they were looking well. They didn't. Yeah.
I saw images of the before and after of the Gaza women, the Palestinian women. A lot of them aged dramatically while
Yeah.
in detention by the Israelis. But that's one comment that I came across today is that how Israeli society is going to. Obviously, they're happy to see the cap. Everybody should be with their families, okay, beyond politics. But they must have been really deep in some tunnel someplace,
Right.
okay? And they must have had access to sunshine. I mean, they would have had scurvy by now,
Yeah.
okay? So, These are lingering questions. And George is right. One of the things that kind of surprised me, I guess they did it in central Gaza City because it's such a huge number of people, and it's a lot harder to focus in on one individual face. But these guys were pretty well garbed. They looked pretty healthy. They didn't look skinny or
Right.
anything, and they were well armed, and they looked very motivated. So
Right.
this is far from over. But I've always contended it's never really been a war against Hamas. It has been a
Yep.
genocide to get rid of Palestinians.
Right, but then that's going to be the question. Netanyahu says we want to restart the war because we haven't achieved our objectives, and this is the view that is being propounded by Ben Gvir and Smotrich. Well, we can't stop this because we haven't achieved our objectives. So Netanyahu says, okay, we want to restart it. And then what does Trump say? I mean, he may well say, look, you've had 15 months. I mean, why would I believe that if I give you another 15 months, you're going to achieve these objectives? And I don't know that Netanyahu is going to have a good answer to that. Right? But this is Trump, who's a serious negotiator. I mean, this is a guy who's a serious businessman, and that's the kind of question you as a businessman you ask. Well, you've had 15 months. I've given you all this money. What makes you what makes you think that you're going to achieve, if I give you a lot more money, that you're actually going to achieve your objectives? So Trump may well just say, that's it, enough. We're done. I'm not saying he will, but at least that unlike Biden, has been in the world, has lived in the world. He's not just a professional Washington hack, and could say, we're done. We can't go through this, in other 15 months, another 18 months, another 2 years.
Right. George did something right now that our friends in this podcastscape should take heed. George didn't make a prediction. He built a case.
Right.
Okay? He built a case with available data points. George didn't predict anything here.
Right.
Given the data that we have and the trajectory that we have been able to observe, there's a possibility, a preponderance of reasons to believe that. But that wasn't a prediction.
Right.
That wasn't a prediction.
No.
And I wish our friends would do the same thing. Right. Build a theory of the case.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
No, he's finished. He's out. Oh, it's over. Yeah. Next week. We're all tired of that, everybody. We're all tired of it. Build
exactly.
a case.
That's right. Yeah. That's exactly right. And speaking of building a case, so there was an article today in the New York Times doing a kind of, whoa, I wonder what Trump's going to do. And they seem to be very confident apropos of Ukraine. And I want to show you here. Well, this is their man, David Sanger.
Oh, God.
Yes, exactly. He's been doing the same thing for about 50 years.
The imperial scribe.
That's right. He says, get your scorecards, global opportunities for Trump, the deal maker. And then he says, what might a deal look like? So I'm just going to focus on Ukraine. First, most Biden and Trump officials acknowledge, at least in private, that Russia would most likely keep its forces in the roughly 20% of Ukraine it now occupies as part of an armistice similar to the one that halted but did not end the Korean War. The harder part of any agreement is the security accord. Who would guarantee that Mr. Putin wouldn't use the halt in the fighting to rearm, recruit, and train new forces, learn from the mistakes of the past 3 years, and reinvade? Doesn't that go the other way? Who would guarantee that NATO isn't going to use the breathing space to rearm and prepare for the next round?
And George is not breaking any news here. This is exactly what supporters of Ukraine have been telegraphing for a year. We just need a break to revigor and then continue. Right. They've been saying this themselves.
Exactly. And then it says, Jake Sullivan, Mr. Biden's national security advisor, argues that the Biden team spent the past year putting the architecture in place to provide for that security. What kind of security?
I don't know what architecture he's even talking about.
Yes, that's right. I mean, unless you say you've been pouring in all these arms into Ukraine. Well, that's not an architecture. That's just a guarantee for further war. But Zelensky is suspicious that it's all talk, remembering that no one paid much attention to the 1994 security agreement that Ukraine signed with the US, Britain, and Russia, among others. He says only NATO membership will keep Mr. Putin from attacking again. So the reference here is, of course, to the Budapest Memorandum, which, of course, was not a security agreement. It, we've talked about this many, many times before. It referred to the physical removal of missiles that were on Ukraine's soil in the aftermath of the dissolution of the USSR. There was no security guarantees or anything at all in that agreement. That's why it was called a memorandum. It wasn't a security treaty. Then he goes on, still the broad outlines of a Trump-era deal are visible in the haze. A ceasefire could be enforced by a European peacekeeping force, most likely British, German, and French forces. Now, that I just found so bizarre and so ridiculous. I mean, how can any serious person write anything ridiculous? Why on earth would Russia agree to a peacekeeping force likely led by British, German, and French forces who have been fighting on the other side? That's not a peacekeeping force. That's an adversary force. They're there as a guarantee for further war.
That's an exhibit. That is a force that will be prepared to fight Russia.
That's
not
it.
to keep
British,
peace.
yeah. British, German, and French forces. Well, what have British, German, and French forces been doing all this time? They've been actively involved in assisting Ukraine. So that's not a peacekeeping force. And then the key two senior Biden officials said would be whether Mr. Trump would be willing to keep the United States in its central role of providing intelligence, arms, and the permission for Ukraine to strike into Russian territory fairly close to the Ukraine border. So what has that got to do with peace? You started one moment that this is a peace agreement. Oh, but the United States will be involved in providing intelligence, arms, and the permission for Ukraine to strike into Russian territory fairly close to the Ukraine border.
That's the security architecture, George.
That's the security architecture. And so that's the New York Times view. How on earth can they possibly think that this is a deal? And even if they say, oh, it's going to be British, German, and French, not even American forces, of course the American forces are going to be involved. The British, German, and French forces don't have the capability, the airlift, the logistics to transfer forces into Ukraine. It'll all be reliant on Americans providing the transport, the logistics, the security. So, I mean, or at least no Americans will be involved. Of course, the Americans are going to be involved.
I mean, to follow up on what George said, I mean, if you had an airlift of that kind of material, I don't think an airport will exist in Ukraine to receive such planes. Okay,
right.
That will be very quickly.
Exactly, and but the moment a British, German, or a French soldier is shot at, then immediately the pressure will arise in Washington. Well, we have to do it, and these are our allies. We have to, send our forces in to fight on behalf of our British, German, and French allies. I mean, it's nuts. I can't believe anyone in the Trump orbit is thinking along these idiotic lines, but maybe they are. Well, if so, this Kellogg mission is not going to have a very successful life.
Well, the New York Times is saying is that the United States hasn't properly been fighting Russia. Well, that assumes the countries are at war, right?
Right.
But they're not. Okay. But I mean, in fact, that's how the Russian side sees it. They see the United States at war with Russia. They are aiding in every way possible for Ukrainians to launch into Russia missiles to kill Russians. Okay. The Russians are not killing Americans in Missouri.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of insane. But these are the people around him, and Bannon is actually explicit. I mean, he doesn't just say Gorka. He says Keith Kellogg. He says Kellogg is just bad news. I mean, he's heading this peace mission. Now, I think, as we've discussed, and I think we're in agreement, I think a summit with Putin is likely to take place. I think and I think quite soon, because at this stage, even if he has all these advisors saying, "Oh, it's a bad idea. Don't meet Putin. No, no, no. He's going to wrap you around his little finger." I think he's going to go ahead with this meeting, but I don't think anything is going to come out of it. I think it'll be just sort of a fairly pointless, quite amicable, but I don't think that anything substantive will come out of it.
And keep in mind, everyone, it's not spoken enough about, in my opinion, is that this stratagem to end this conflict, who's sitting at the table?
Right.
The United States and Russia.
Right.
And that's what it's really all about.
Right.
Zelensky apparently, I mean, Don Jr., you have to take him with a grain of salt. He tried to informally have himself invited to the inauguration 3 times.
Right.
I mean,
Yes.
he calls him a weirdo and all of that. I don't know what that good cop, bad cop
I think
is.
it's a good cop, bad cop thing. I think Don Jr. is the conduit to MAGA, to keep them in line. Because I think people in MAGA world, like Bannon, who's a spokesman for that, they're keeping a very sharp eye on what Trump is going to do. I think they're very wary that Trump is going to get sucked into pursuing the same policy as before.
And people like Bannon, and George and I may or may not disagree with him. We can talk about it another time. But Bannon just like, why are you wasting your time on Ukraine and Russia when China is on the menu?
Right.
That's his. That's where he's coming from.
That's his. Yeah, absolutely. People like him, to a lesser extent, Navarro, and I think Navarro is more preoccupied with Russia than Bannon is. They for them, their focus is China. So they're China, and so yeah, that's the and then one other thing.
I'm sorry, George, but I mean, if Trump and I'm sure he knows exactly what Bannon is doing. Okay, I'm sure he's well versed in that, particularly if it's video where he can watch it. He doesn't have to read. Okay, Bannon has powerful words and a lot of images. Okay, and he's sending a signal here is that. First of all, you have to mention Ukraine in your inaugural speech. You have to. You can't avoid it. Okay. And Trump is going to take credit for the ceasefire. That's all nice and fine. If the killing stops for a little while, great. Credit all around, whatever. I'm really sick and tired of apportioning this and that to people.
Right.
But I mean, whatever Trump says, he's going to be held to account. I will quickly end the war. Okay, you said that during the campaign. Now you are president of the United States, the 47th president of the United States. What are you going to do?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's exactly right. I mean, you can either, cut a deal in which you take Russia's security concerns seriously, which NATO has signally refused to do, which Biden administration has signally refused to do, or you can just continue with the same before and indeed escalate. So that's Trump. Those are Trump's only options. He can either do that or he can escalate. If he escalates, I think it's going to destroy his presidency. I think it's just going to lead to disaster. And not only will Ukraine be his war, he's going to be accused of being a warmonger, a reckless warmonger, somebody who has brought the world to the brink of nuclear annihilation, and they'll say this is a really dangerous person to White House, and they'll say, yeah, but isn't that your war? No, we never really intended to go down this path. No, we were very, very careful. It was very measured what Biden was doing. He was avoiding any kind of towards World War III. Trump isn't like that, and I think that's absolutely just destroy his presidency very quickly.
Well, I absolutely agree with George because Trump has a choice. Largely constructed by the previous administration and the media, is either you work towards the goal of peace, not winning the war, not punishing Russia, strategic defeat. No, bringing peace back to the European continent. It's a winning message. Do you have the brain trust behind you to enact it? That's big. That's a big question. George and I are basically on the negative side of the ledger there. He's got the wrong people around him. Or escalation ladder. And then that means nuclear exchanges
That's right.
in the
Absolutely.
offing.
Yeah. Yeah. And he became very unpopular very quickly because I don't think American people want this. They've
Are
never
you
been
going to be
desperate
unpopular
for
for
it.
peace?
Yeah.
Will you become unpopular for pushing peace?
That's right. That's right.
That's different.
That's it. And that's the thing. He was successful in this presidential cycle as he was in 2016 on being the peace candidate. He's the one who said, "I'm going to bring this thing to an end. This war should never have happened. Wouldn't have happened if I were president. I'm going to bring it to an end in 24 hours." That was it. He was the peace candidate. Where she was essentially, well, we're going to continue as before. That's it. So he had that. But if he becomes the president who's really getting the world to the brink of World War III, he's going to be very unpopular very quickly. And no matter how much he can start blustering, people are not going to be taken
Yeah,
thus.
but George, all the more so, and this is something that George and I've said from day one. This is Biden's war.
Exactly.
Framing
Right.
is going to be, it's not the solution, but it's the path. It creates a path.
Yeah.
Okay. I said earlier, you have the Blinkens and the Sullivans. They had a world of memes. We're
Right.
fighting for democracy.
Right. Right. That's right.
What?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Now, I'm saying we must bring peace back to the European continent. Okay. And security is the key. I know that those are messages and ideas that have been filtered out of the discussion. They must be front and center of the discussion. That's the way Trump cuts this Gordian knot.
That's right. That's the only way you can do it. No, I absolutely agree. Now, one other thing that was kind of interesting, because it follows on from what we were talking about. I think just a few days ago, we were talking about NATO planning a war in the Baltic because the Russians have been waging their hybrid war in the Baltic Sea because they've been destroying.
Oh, really?
Out of the hybrid war, they've been destroying these undersea cables. And so NATO had a big conference a few days
Because cables are never disturbed in the Baltic.
Exactly. So yeah, because they say this is very, very dangerous what Russia's doing. And so, but strangely enough, the Washington Post ran a story the other day that seemed to call into question the NATO claim. And here it says, accidents, not Russian sabotage, behind undersea cable damage. Official
Well,
statement.
George and I talked about this before this article came out. If Washington Post, if you're watching the Gaggle, the tip jar,
The tip jar, exactly.
is available. Okay?
Yeah, give us the tip. Yes.
The tip barrel is available.
Yeah, exactly. They've got deep pockets. Jeff Bezos, he can bankroll us, and I think Buddy and Apple will have a lot to say. Yeah, we want some of that Bezos money. So it says an emerging consensus among U.S. and European security services holds that accidents were the cause of damage to Baltic seabed energy and communication lines. Huh. It's very interesting because we were exactly what we were addressing. You said, yeah, well, how do you know, these accidents? Well, how many accidents are there per year in the various seas in the world, in the Baltic, especially, there's a lot of heavy traffic there. It says ruptures of undersea cables that have rattled European security officials in recent months were likely the result of maritime accidents rather than Russian sabotage, according to several US and European intelligence officials. The determination reflects an emerging consensus among US and European security services, according to senior officials from 3 countries involving in ongoing investigations. Then it says the cases raise suspicions that Russia was targeting undersea infrastructure as part of its broader campaign of hybrid attacks across Europe. I love this word hybrid, which sounds very important. In other words, it's basically anything that goes wrong in Europe, you blame on Russia, and then you claim that it's part of a hybrid war. And prompted stepped up security measures, including an announcement last week that NATO would launch new patrol and surveillance operations in the Baltic Sea, which is what we address last
What,
week.
what do you bet that some of those surveillance operations will probably disturb, if not destroy, cables?
But so far, officials said investigations involving the United States and half a dozen European security services have turned up no indication that commercial ships suspected of dragging anchors across seabed systems did so intentionally or the direction of Moscow. So
Well,
there's evidence, and yet
it's
NATO already held this conference and declared that we're going to do this and we're going to do that and we're going to start boarding Russian ships. Turns out there's no evidence for any of your assertions.
well, it's very curious that they're so interested in the Baltic, and they have a half a dozen European security services involved. So who blew up the pipeline? Who blew up Nord
Exactly.
Stream? I mean, you're really like a fine tooth comb. It's like
Yes,
finding a needle on the bed of the Baltic Sea, and
right.
you still don't know who blew up the pipeline.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah. After this is 2.5 years. Instead, US and European officials said that the evidence gathered to date, including intercepted communications and other classified intelligence, points to accidents caused by inexperienced crews serving aboard poorly maintained vessels. Well,
Yep.
that happens, accidents caused
Yeah.
by
Well,
inexperienced
I mean,
crews.
the West, it's emerging calling card to the world is summed up in one word: incompetence.
Right. Yes. US officials cited clear explanations that have come to light in each case, indicating a likelihood that the damage was accidental and a lack of evidence suggesting Russian culpability. Officials with two European intelligence services said they concurred with US assessments. Despite initial suspicions that Russia was involved, one European official said that there is counter evidence suggesting otherwise. The US and European officials declined to elaborate and spoke on the condition of anonymity, citing the sensitivity of ongoing investigations. And then the probes center on three incidents over the past 18 months, 3 incidents in 18 months. And they're already talking about this hybrid war, in which ships traveling to or from Russian ports were suspected of severing key links in a vast underwater network of conduits that carry gas, electricity, and internet traffic to millions of people across Northern Europe. In the most recent case, Finland seized an oil tanker suspected of dragging its anchor across an undersea power line connecting Finland and Estonia. Finnish authorities said the vessel, the Eagle S, is part of a shadow fleet of tanker ships helping Moscow sell oil on global markets in violation of international sanctions. There are no international sanctions, these are unilateral American European sanctions. There's no such thing as a shadow fleet. They're engaging in perfectly legal commercial activity, but they seized it for no reason. Basically, they have no reason. They just seized an oil tanker. We don't even know whether any real damage had actually occurred. Maybe the idea that there was any damage was made up. Russia's denials of responsibility have been greeted with deep skepticism by European officials confronting a broader wave of hybrid attacks attributed to Moscow. US and European security officials last year disrupted an alleged Russian plot to smuggle incendiary devices on cargo planes in an apparent trial run for later attacks targeting the United States and Canada. This, of course, is totally idiotic. What kind of attacks on the United States are you going to do with incendiary devices on cargo planes? Well, as we discussed at the time, basically there is a black market on weapons systems and incendiary devices going to and from Ukraine. Some of them are stored in warehouses, and if they're not stored properly, they blow up.
Well,
Um,
and some of these things
nothing's suspicious about that.
are maybe some of these arms are sensitive to air pressure changes and things
Right,
like this.
of course.
So these are really high tech people doing this. No, I think they're probably just shady businessmen
Yes,
trying to get things to their clients. Okay.
right. Exactly. Just exactly. Yeah, they're sending them without proper storage, care, and they tend to blow up. And they always happen in warehouses. They say, well, why are they happening in warehouses? Well, that's where they're stored, awaiting shipment somewhere, and then they blow up. And then, instead of saying this is a total fiasco, this thing that you're doing in Ukraine, instead of that, they say, oh, this is some Russian plot to blow up an empty warehouse. I mean, why would Russians want to blow up an empty warehouse? And so U.S. intelligence officials also warned German authorities that Russia was planning to assassinate the chief executive of one of Europe's largest weapons producers. It's very funny with these assassinations is that these Russian attempts to assassinate, they never succeed. They're always unsuccessful. Oh yeah, there was a plot to assassinate. It's very funny. Everybody else manages to do an assassination. Ukrainians assassinate people all the time. In Russia, they succeed. Some guy in the United States kills a CEO of United Healthcare, a CEO in the streets of Manhattan. That succeeds. But the Russians are just unable to get just at least one assassination off the ground.
And what difference would be the assassination of a chief executive? One of
None,
your
none whatsoever. He'll be replaced by somebody exactly like him. So what's the point of it? And then it says, at the same time, European security officials have accused Russia of using proxies to carry out hundreds of arson attacks. Oh, it's now hundreds. Rail disruptions and smaller sabotage operations aimed at sowing divisions in Europe and sapping support for Ukraine.
But
And again,
has it?
has it? I mean, why would arson attacks?
Has it?
I don't see it.
Is it sowing divisions? Is it sapping support?
Right.
I mean, but that's assuming that the general population has a say in any of these things. They don't.
Exactly. They don't. None whatsoever. Against that backdrop, the damage to seabed systems added to a European sense of being under siege. German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius called the anchor dragging incident in November sabotage. So he did it. He said that, and he had no evidence for it. That's Germany's defense minister, and said that nobody believes that these cables were accidentally severed. Severed, rather, not severed. Severed. Weeks later, Finnish President Alexander Stubb said the Christmas Day incident was definitely linked to Russia. And then experts have also said that the seabed cases fit a pattern of Russian aggression.
Is this the same article?
It's exactly. It's very, very strange. And then this is a classic. The severing of cables may well be random accidents, said Eric Ciaramella, a senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, who previously served as the United States Deputy National Intelligence for Russia. And he says, but it's hard to rule out a concerted Russian campaign when Moscow's intelligence services are trying to assassinate German business executives, starting fires at factories and putting bombs on cargo planes. Now, of course, everyone will remember Eric Ciaramella, although the Washington Post doesn't tell us who he was, but he was the guy who, of course, instituted, along with his good friend, a Ukrainian, the first impeachment of Trump. He was the so-called whistleblower who was so upset about Trump's telephone call with Zelensky that he blew the whistle and launched the impeachment. But they don't mention that, Ciaramella was the name of the whistleblower, but we weren't allowed to mention it because he's a whistleblower and entitles protection. But it's clear he was a guy with a political ideological agenda. So he says it's hard to rule out a concerted Russian campaign. Hard to rule out. That's the negative. This is it's hard to rule out. Therefore, we must rule it in. When Moscow's intelligence services are trying to assassinate business executives, starting fires at factories across Europe and putting bombs on cargo planes.
Is this the New York Times or Washington Post?
This is the Washington Post.
What message are they trying to convey here? Either random accidents, or is this a concerted hybrid campaign?
Exactly. It's like you've got the first half of the article is written by one bunch of people, and then you've got a second half by another bunch of people. So I assume some reporters wrote the first half, and then editors stepped in to finish off the second half, so that somebody comes along and says, "Oh, so the Russians are behind everything." And then they say Pekka Toveri, who represents Finland in the European Parliament and previously served as the country's top military intelligence official, said that the seabed cases are part of a typical hybrid operation for Moscow. The most important thing in any hybrid operation is deniability. Well, of course, deniability, particularly if you haven't done it, then that's how you get deniability. Any proof, he says, Russia's security services may have succeeded in not leaving any proof that would hold up in court. He said, but to conclude that there were accidents is total BS. So that's happened. So there's no evidence that Russia was involved, but to draw the conclusion from that the Russians were not involved, that's total BS. That
Yeah, but I
reminds
mean,
us.
the conclusion you draw from reading this very idiosyncratic article is that the one thing is for sure, some people are really paranoid.
They It kind of reminds me of Salome Zorabichvili, the outgoing she's left now. She's no longer Georgia's president.
She's the ongoing outgoing.
The ongoing outgoing. She's now got a gig at the John McCain Institute.
Of course.
The right place for her. She said, that I don't have any evidence of Russian meddling in Georgia's election, but I don't need to find any evidence. Take it from me, there was Russian meddling. So this is total BS. To conclude that there were accidents.
Well, obviously, my prediction actually came true. Is that they cut off her free dry cleaning service, and she was out. She was out.
Yeah.
They didn't pick up the plates from yesterday's breakfast.
I don't think so. And then Toveri and others cited anomalies in the behavior of vessels involved, as well as evidence that Russia has for decades devoted extensive resources, including a dedicated military unit known as the General Staff Main Directorate for Deep Sea Research, to mapping Western seabed infrastructure and identifying vulnerabilities. That's kind of what you do when you make military preparations. I mean, you can map, deep infrastructure.
Yeah, but okay, this is something that the Russians have been doing for decades. I perfectly accept that. The General Staff Main Directorate for Deep Sea Research, but they would have been very handy when constructing the Nord Stream pipeline.
Yes, that's right. That's
just
right.
make sure it's safe
That's
and there's no sabotage and there are no
That's right.
accidents. Okay.
Right. That's exactly
Yeah,
it.
they map it out really well because that was one of the major gripes that the Poles were claiming is that it is very dangerous because of war munitions that were dropped there, sinking of ships and all that.
Right.
And the Russians said, well, we have the General Staff Main Directorate for Deep Sea Research. Right. We know what we're doing down there.
Right. That's right. And then here he says, despite advances in undersea surveillance capabilities, attributing attacks has proved difficult. The bombing of Nord Stream gas pipeline between Russia and Germany in September 2022 was initially widely blamed on Russia, but is now believed to have been carried out by a senior Ukrainian military officer with deep ties to the country's intelligence service.
That's their BS revisionist. There's no reasonable evidence that theory works at all. As a matter of fact, anybody that has any common sense would say, get out of town, get off the grass. This is
no, but they had to come up with this Ukrainian story because it was just so embarrassing for the Germans who have invested so much into the Western Alliance and NATO, and to say, hey, it was your American friends that did it. So they had to come up, well, no, we had nothing to do with it. It was the Ukrainians. Of course, that's bad enough as well, because, hey, these are the people that you're throwing all these billions and billions of euros for them, and this is what they do to you, which, again, they haven't in any way changed their policy. Oh, but Zelensky himself wasn't involved. Oh, well, that's okay. So we can go on sending them, billions of euros because Zelensky was not involved.
That was at the end of the article. I mean, if they're so obsessed in trying to find out what's happening to these cables under the Baltic Sea. Why aren't they trying to figure out what happened with Nord Stream? I mean, the biggest man-made natural disaster in history,
Yes.
and you're looking for a cable between Finland and Estonia.
That's right. That's right. Yes, exactly. Some cable, something which even by their own standards cause minimal damage. I mean, even by their own fairy tales, they can't make any claims that this was serious damage occurred. So that's what they're preoccupied with. But they see, they've accepted the most ridiculous claims about Nord Stream. Anyway, let's go to our locals page and
Okay.
see what
I don't
our
know. Maybe you disabled it, George, but I don't see any comments on my right-hand side. So
you can't.
not
I
one. I
haven't.
don't see.
I can see them.
Okay, I can't. There's
I,
maybe
I haven't disabled anything. Live chat. Click on live chat. Can you see live chat?
I can't see live chat. I'm so paranoid of of exiting this podcast by hitting a
Right,
button here.
right. But if you click on if you do there's live chat studio campaigns. If you click on live chat, you should see the comments.
Okay, I'd see leave stream, so I'm not going to do that.
All right. Then, yeah. Don't leave. Don't leave. All right. So let's look at on our Gaggle page, and we have a Cynthia, a good friend. Cynthia is here. We always very appreciate generosity. And it says she comments apropos of Breaker Morant, which is the film that we screened here on a movie night, and which of course involves a court martial that took place during the Boer War. The British court-martialed some Australians who had committed war crimes. Of course, it was British hypocrisy because everyone else had committed war crimes, but nonetheless, um, they were. This is, but this was the court-martial. Anyway, um, Cynthia says some consider the Second Boer War the first dirty war of the 20th century, while others consider Argentina's dirty war the first such war. But how can it be called a dirty war when it was just a military coup and not an actual war? Why is the Syrian war called a dirty war when other similar wars in the Middle East aren't called that? Also, in the Dirty War Index, is the Dirty War Index an accurate indicator of how dirty any given dirty war is? Well, I think you're right that the Boer War was the paradigm of the dirty war. It was the first essentially guerrilla war, in modern times. In other words, it was a war in which you had an army, the traditional army, that was fighting not another traditional army, but essentially a civilian population who learned to train, learned to fight, and used highly unorthodox tactics, whether sort of bombings, terrorism, against a classically trained infantry army. And for some time, the British had no means of fighting the Boers. These were just farmers, and they didn't know how to fight this new type of war. And then they did engage in what has become the classic anti-guerrilla warfare, in which you do indeed punish the civilian population for
Population.
why I can hear echoes.
I do too. I mean, and the introduction of concentration camps.
Exactly. That's what they did when introducing concentration camps, was precisely to try to isolate the civilians from the guerrillas. So in a way, I mean, the Americans did something similar in Vietnam. Then they created the strategic hamlets program to isolate the peasants from the guerrillas. And of course the British did the same thing in Malaya. So it was a new type of war, extremely brutal. And again, the British did pursue a very brutal policy, punishing civilians for giving support to the guerrilla army. So that I think it is fair to say that was the first of the dirty wars. Now,
Well, I mean, also, it's a very good question, and unfortunately, I think a dirty war is in the eye of the beholder. I mean, George, we can try to parse these things here, but I mean, the term is overused. Number
right,
one, okay, because it's not clearly defined what it means. Okay, I refer to the Syrian proxy dirty war because these were essentially terrorist groups. Like George is pointing out, these didn't represent nation states. These
yeah,
were outside intelligence operations
right.
funding various groups to overthrow the legitimate government of a country. So that's how I use it in the Syrian case. But it's a very good question. I mean, you really have to parse it out how the conflict is
Right,
played out. And
right,
one important thing is the punishment of civilians. I think
right.
that falls more into that ledger.
That's right, and you basically do things that are just very cruel, which is, well, for every one of our soldiers that is killed, we're going to kill 10 civilians. I mean, we regard that as a war crime, but ultimately, as the powers found out, that's kind of the way how you can win this war, because the British at first had no idea how to fight the Boers. Well, one thing that was interesting is that the cause of the Boers in Britain became a kind of a liberal cause. A lot of liberals thought that the Boers had a legitimate case. They were the ones who had built up South Africa. They had created their own civilization, a distinctive civilization. I mean, yes, they're originally Dutchmen, but they created their own civilization. There was a lot of money. There was a lot of natural resources there, a lot of gold and diamonds, and the British wanted to get their hands on it. And of course, then
Yeah,
hence
the diamond trade.
exactly the Boers didn't like being pushed aside by the British, and they fought back. They fought back with great skill and great tenacity, and so it became a liberal cause to in supporting the Boers. Or, for instance, Churchill was a supporter of the Boers. Subsequently, of course, the Boers became the most reviled people in the world. When they introduced the apartheid system after World War II, and then it became the sort of the cause célèbre for more than 40 years. The most evil thing you can have is the apartheid system. But it's funny to think that there at the time of the Boer War, the Boers were a liberal cause.
Yeah, and for George and myself, the anti-apartheid movement was front and center during our younger years. That was
Yeah,
very much the cause of the
right,
time
right.
after Vietnam. Yeah.
That's right, exactly. But I mean, to go return to Cynthia's point about why is the Syrian war called a dirty war? Well, because Syria had the misfortune of having the West united against it, and so then the West
And plus,
categorized that. Hey, that's the dirty war.
we have the admission from the outgoing. I guess is it over yet, George? Is it has the inauguration happened? What time is
No,
it?
it starts at 6 p.m. my time, so 8 p.m. your time. So there's
Okay,
still
so
37
they're
minutes
still
to go.
there. They're still there. They have admitted that the sanctions were designed to punish the civilian population. That is part of what a dirty war is. They said, no, 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 I'm not hurting the civilian. It's just against the regime and all that. They've been openly admitting that and
Yes,
patting themselves on the back. Hey, we got him. The
that's right.
sanctions worked. We punished
Yeah,
the Syrian people.
yep,
We impoverished all of them. Okay,
yep.
that goes under the rubric of a dirty war.
Yes. No question, no question. That was the goal, that to bring the Syrian government to its knees, because the Syrian government, its ultimate sin was that it had the wrong friends. Its friends were Russia and Iran, and the West was absolutely determined to push them out of any kind of influence in the Middle East. Um, but you're right. I mean, that's all of this kind of dirty war. They did that, of course, against when Serbia was waging a dirty war in Bosnia. The Serbs were waging a dirty war in Kosovo. Again, why? Well, they decided that the Serbs were the bad guys. Why were they bad? Well, because they were friendly with Russia, and NATO was determined to eliminate Russian influence out of the Balkans once and for all. So yeah. So anyway, you're absolutely right, Cynthia. And let's see. Um, so Peter, you still can't see the
No,
live chat.
it's just black.
It's gone. It's gone. Yeah, the black.
One black. Okay.
Let's see if we can find anything.
Like I said, I would try to fiddle around with it, but I know it would end in a river of tears. Sorry.
Yes, yes. No, you don't want to do that because it's guaranteed that we're just going to disconnect.
Oh, we apologize for last week. That was weird.
Yes, that was a very weird. Exactly. That was very weird. That never happened. Just the
Yeah, I'll
screen.
tell you how weird it was. Is that when I leave the stream, I still have the Rumble Studio platform up. Okay, it just says it is ended. What happened was the entire screen went black. There was
Right.
nothing. It was
Right.
nothing to hit. Nothing. I had to forcefully turn my computer off.
Right.
I mean, it just went. It just like
I
everything
I,
just
it
went
was,
into ether.
I have to say that it kind of reminded me of the final episode of The Sopranos when everybody watched
Exactly.
that and the screen went blank. And I think just about, I don't know, millions of people were all thinking, damn, at this very moment when we're gonna get the last scene of The Soprano, some idiot has made a mess of it and the screen has gone blank. But of course, that was the whole point. Um, uh,
Well, I think I was thinking about the shuttle disaster. That's probably what the all the astronauts experienced at that
yes,
moment.
yes, yes, yeah. Um, So John Machek or John Machek says, "Greetings from Peter's old stomping ground, Front Range, Colorado." It says recent.
I lived in Wheat Ridge outside of Denver for about 10 years of my life. Yeah,
Yes,
from about 5 to maybe a little bit before, maybe like 3 to 15. Yeah.
right. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. So Trump says that on Friday he's going to go to California and he's going to inspect the wildfires and have a chat with Gavin Newsom. Uh, yeah,
Well, I remember it was, I think it was his first press conference after he was elected in 2016. And then the torrent of hate from the media came in. Somebody mentioned the BBC. He said, "Oh yeah, that's a real beauty."
that's a that's a great one. It's the first time that's the Trumpian expression. Oh, that's a beauty. I mean, oh, another beauty.
So I mean, Newsom, he's a real beauty. Yeah,
um,
it's so stunning, the inability of these people to take any responsibility for
right,
anything. It's just
right.
stunning.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean that's right, and particularly when they decide they're going to blame everything on on global warming. I was like, okay, well, it's climate change. I mean, what can we do? Well, you could change your policies. I mean, if you have wildfires every single year, several of them every single year, they cause immense damage. You think, well, isn't it your responsibility to somehow change policies to make sure that the damage is limited in some way? But said, oh well, sorry, we can't really do anything. I mean, think this is unsatisfactory. Every year you have so many wildfires, and you have so many, billions every time. There's billions and billions of dollars of damage. Um, all right. Well, I think Peter, we should end early and get ourselves ready for the inaugural, so that we can actually watch the address. I think we can make comments as much as
Oh,
possible.
I think actually I will watch it. I will
Yes.
watch it. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to um how is it, is it in the Capitol building?
Yes, it'll be in the Capitol building. It's a
In the It's not, that doesn't hold too many people.
no, that's right. It's going to be a much smaller affair than I think the last time they did that was during Reagan's second inaugural in 1985. But I think that was colder. That was a lot colder than now. But I mean, I do think it's about security, but it is also true that we've all become much softer in the 40 years. I mean, so 40 years, because oh no, we can't do that. But basically, in 1985, people said, well, okay, it's over -5 degrees. We can stand
I
outside in
think
-5.
that Franklin Delano Roosevelt's first inaugural in March of 1934. That was a cold one. That was a real cold one, and it was a massive crowd. Okay, I hope we're not going to go through this. My crowd is bigger than your crowd thing again. Oh,
Right.
okay, George is right. People just gotten soft. Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
let's
Yeah.
put on another sweater. Okay.
Yes,
Outside, get some cold air. It's good for your lungs.
that's right. That's right. Well,
I mean,
Jack.
considering where I live, okay? I mean, when people complain about the cold, I just don't have the time of day for it. Okay.
That's exactly right. Well, Jack Kennedy, I mean, he used to wear this thermal underwear, and so basically, his entire body, he had some, wearing kind of underwear, so that way he could stand out in the cold, with a just wearing a suit and tie, and then he looked very dashing, because if you were wearing a coat, an overcoat, then your movements are constricted, you don't look dashing. But if you're standing there wearing a suit and tie, you can say, "Hey, look, I can withstand anything."
What do you think, George, back in those days? Was that conscious, or is this Jack just said, no, I just don't want to wear a jacket? I mean, what was the reasoning behind it? Because George brings up such a good point. I mean, JFK, irrespective if you think about his politics, I mean, he's still kind of the gold standard of presentation as a politician. It hasn't changed in our lifetime.
Right. No, that's right. I tend to think that this was very carefully choreographed. I think they planned that campaign meticulously to make him as dashing as possible. But it's very interesting. I mean, we just I just posted the book Seymour Hersh's The Dark Side of Camelot. It's part of the Gaggle book club. Um, and what's interesting there, I mean, Hirsch is very critical of him, really very, very harshly critical. But he does acknowledge one thing about him is that he was a dashing character. He had a real appeal to men and to women. In fact, he had more of an appeal to men than to women. I mean, so all the people that he came across, men, quite worldly men, were absolutely dazzled by him. We're absolutely charmed by him. And so I think as a politician, he was reckless and foolish, and very minimal accomplishments. But as a personality, he did have an appeal. I mean, people really were taken by him, charmed by him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the mold that has been, like I said, the
Right.
gold standard. I mean, people make that reference. I mean, remember Gary Hart? Remember
Yes.
that loser?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah,
Loser. Yeah.
he was a big time loser, but I mean, and it was. I remember his critics later. JFK had this thing about hanging his thumb in his jacket
right.
pocket.
That's right.
Okay,
Right.
and Gary Hart, when he was it 84?
It was yes, he ran in 84 and in 88. 88 is
And
when
every single public picture of him was him hanging his thumb in his jacket,
That's right.
to give that subliminal of JFK,
That's
and
right.
the images of picturing of him going up the angle, and he was
That's right.
hanging like.
That's a bit the thumb. What I think is also interesting in the case of JFK, and this is very rarely um, commented upon is his extremely poor health. I mean, he was, he had this Addison's disease, for which was getting continually cortisone injections, and it's a serious illness. It affects the immunity system, um, and this that when he was wearing a brace, he had to wear a brace, basically just to keep his back
Uh,
in place. Exactly. But I think, and I think Hirsch, I think, points out that may have done him in during the assassination, because he actually it was rigid. It made him rigid. He
but
had
it
to set up.
confined him. Yeah.
He
Yeah.
can find him because, in other words, after that first shot, anybody else would have just ducked down. But because he was wearing a brace, he couldn't duck. So that's why he grabbed his throat. But he was still upright, and therefore absolutely plumb target for the second shot. I mean,
Also,
with Trump immediately dived down after the first shot.
there's a lot of them out there, but they're not widely circulated. JFK was on crutches a lot.
Yes. Yeah.
He was on crutches a lot.
That's right.
Okay, for the reasons George just explained, because he needed to keep his back straight. Okay,
Right.
because
Right.
if he slouched, it would create an enormous amount of pain.
Yep.
And so I've seen some of those pictures, and to this day, they can protect the iconography
Right.
of JFK. They're not widely seen, but there are a
Right.
number of times in White House meetings and all that, he's standing up and he's keeping himself erect on those
Yes.
crutches.
Yes. That's right. And that one other thing that we didn't mention apropos of Trump is that he says he's going to open up all these files, the files on the JFK assassination, the RFK assassination, and the Martin Luther King assassination. I imagine he will do that. I don't know whether we're going to learn anything more, because the years have gone by, and they open up yet more files, but we don't really find out anything more. We just get lots and lots of details, all kinds of rabbit holes. Who's this guy? Who's that guy? But nothing much ever really emerges.
And this is just a symptom of overclassification. The CIA and the FBI want to keep them classified because they want to keep them classified. There's no other real reason.
Right.
It is because we think we have to preserve our institution. Okay.
Yep.
And I would bet big money right now. There's no one mentioned in those files that are alive.
No, of course not. Of course not.
Secrecy for secrecy's sake.
No, that's right. And I think that's what happened when the last time the JFK files. I mean, Trump released some. I can't remember whether Biden also released some JFK files. I know Trump released some in his first term, but there's no point. They find out this guy. Oh, that's interesting, but he's dead. And so where are we going to go with that? And after all, even Bobby has now been, that was what, 56 years ago. So 56 years ago. So again, very, very few people who had any living involvement with the events of that day are alive. So it's I know it's a rabbit hole. Everyone wants to say, oh, let's see the files, but then you think, well, okay, well, maybe there's some more files that we can look at, and we'll get somewhere. So I think it's all very exciting.
Isn't it interesting, George? This obsession, and people. It's an industry. People make money off of it. You have to accept that. But look at Hunter Biden's laptop. I mean, how much forensic study of all those business connections? You can the pictures and all of that. I could care less about that. It makes no impression on me whatsoever.
Right.
He was a rich kid and he had bad habits. Okay,
Right.
but the same kind of vigor to
Right.
find out about JFK is never applied to people that who obviously were involved in criminal behavior.
No, that's right. It was quite an extraordinary event, because you had you had this assassination, which itself was shocking, and then you have, we'll have this blue ribbon commission headed by the Chief Justice, Earl Warren, and then you're gonna yeah. So I think Peter's gonna get his copy of the Warren Commission report. That's it. That's the Warren Commission report. So yeah, that's right. That's it. That's the one. Earl Warren headed it, and then of course Gerald Ford was a member of the committee. There it is. Yeah. Yep, that's it. And of course Alan Dulles was on the Warren Commission. Alan Dulles was, of course, the former CIA head who was fired by Kennedy after the Bay of Pigs. Um, and he was, I mean, you know, it was inadequate in many ways, but basically hasn't been challenged. I mean, it hasn't really been challenged in any serious way. People have poked holes in it. People have cast doubts on this or that aspect of it, but fundamentally, it stood the test of time. Even Lyndon Johnson wasn't impressed with it when he got the Warren Commission report. But basically, no one has really put forward, which is what you'd have to do,
Well,
an alternative hypothesis with some serious evidence to back it up.
the flip side of that, George and I've kind of, I think privately we've talked about this in the past, but there are enough holes and enough ambiguity, the autopsy, these are the facts that have been made available. Okay. The problem is that there was an insufficient amount of transparency, and there was a political imperative at the time. And it's interesting that we're kind of ending our podcast on this as Trump is being inaugurated. I think those that only are aware of the assassination and through books and films and things like that, but that was a huge shock to the body politic of America that has never been recovered. The country has never recovered from that assassination.
Right.
And I think because of that trauma, there's this burning desire there must be more. How could this happen to us?
Absolutely.
How could this happen? And I think that trauma drives this desire to maybe look for things that are not there. I'm kind of a little bit agreeing with George here. There's too many things that are left dangling to bother people, and we live with that to this very day.
Right. No, I think it's right. That was it was an extraordinary, just in a shocking character. But I mean, equally shocking, I find, is that again, we're just minutes away from Trump being inaugurated. He was almost killed. He was almost killed a few months ago. I mean, and it's always been forgotten. I mean, it's just boom. Nobody talks about it. Nobody mentions this. And that's it. So this again,
well,
very, very strange.
But George, it's interesting you mentioned that, because I was too young. I was alive, but I was just too young. Okay. But all through my life growing up, I never heard, maybe some people did say it, but I never heard, Oswald should have succeeded. I never heard that.
No.
I never heard that.
No.
I never heard, it would have been better if he had been killed. I never once heard that. You could say, but you could still be critical of Kennedy. His involvement in Vietnam. Right. Okay, he's a womanizer. But I never heard, I wish he'd been, he deserved what he got. In Trump's case, you have millions of people say, a missed opportunity.
Yeah, I agree. It's very straight. Yeah. Yeah, that's right, and I think that's why it's really been swept under the rug. But it was a close run thing. I mean, it really was just a few millimeters, and he would have been gone. I mean, the bullet actually hit him, just basically hit his head. So it really could have been over, boom, just like that. And the strange thing is, we know so little about it. We still don't know anything about who was this guy, where he came from, how was he able to plan this so meticulously. Not an easy thing to do. Then to come so close. Basically, we just know nothing. That's it. Just.
It's really interesting as Trump takes office, and the guy is totally into optics. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I still chuckled to myself when he was in the garbage truck during the last days of the campaign. I just think that is just retail politics at its best.
Right.
Okay. Image is almost everything. But then one of the challenges that Donald Trump will face over the next 4 years, he'll never get another iconic picture like that of himself.
No.
Can't top it. It can't be topped.
No. Exactly. That's a great iconic picture. But also iconic was his mugshot that he immediately marketed. He pulled it off. He had the skill that, hey, we're doing a mug shot, and then he gave that scowl, and boom, it just it was immediately, that was it. Hey, I want a T-shirt with that scowl.
Free campaign,
Yeah,
in-kind campaign investment for him. I mean, again, I mean, look, okay, everybody, here's a test. What's an iconic picture of Biden? Not that, him falling down or, none of those. There isn't one.
right.
There isn't one. Barack Obama, no,
No,
no.
no,
George W. Bush at 9/11, it's very
yep,
iconic.
that was iconic. I thinking of with Bill Clinton. I imagine it was when he hugged what's her name, Monica Lewinsky. Which that was people were watching that. No one knew anything about Monica Lewinsky, but they think it was very strange why an intern would put her
Well,
arms around the president.
obviously, you look at that footage. I mean, there's a connection there.
Oh yeah, yeah. But at the same time, this was on a news show, and I guess reporters were wondering, that's strange, isn't it? I mean, an intern would
And
just put his arms around the president.
Nixon had quite a few. I'm not a crook. That
Yes.
press conference. Okay.
Yes.
Lyndon Baines Johnson, the image that he's
That's right.
been
When
doing.
he said, yeah, he was constantly getting posing for these photographs. Because remember, I mean, presidents are always getting photographed. Because there's the White House photographer, and they're always there. Their job is to photograph the president all the time. So Johnson was always posing like that, like that, or he would have his head in his hands, like, God, this Vietnam war that's wearing me down.
And another thing I kind of like, being a Johnson junkie, and I am, he had good taste in eyewear because he had a lot of different glasses. You got to remember, this guy grew up real poor. And so he liked the nice things in life.
Right.
Okay. He
That's
really did. He really enjoyed being elevated. Okay. He had very stylish glasses at times. I compliment him. Okay.
Yes, that's right. Yes. What's also interesting, when he was wearing those glasses, you saw just how much he aged in office. I mean, if you want, presidents who age in office, I mean, he really aged. I mean, if you just look at his picture, 1963, what he looked like in 68, I mean, his face was just all,
Well, he died in 73.
73, yeah.
There was 60 Minutes. I think it was 60 Minutes dinner. An interview with him would be his last.
Right.
He looked awful.
Right.
He was unkept.
Right.
His hair had grown out.
So his hair grew.
He was a broken man. He was broken.
Yeah.
Broken.
Yeah.
And then it's in stark contrast to he was unbreakable when he was in the Senate. I mean, this guy knew how to run the show. He could run circles around people.
Right.
And he got things done. He would use rules that were so arcane that no one in the whole Congress could remember. He'd come up with this rule. I can avoid this committee. I can do it through this committee, have it one line on the bottom of, and he was just like,
yeah, that's right. But he was broken by the way he became president, which means he essentially didn't really deserve it, didn't really feel he deserved it. And then he made the cardinal mistake, is that he kept on the entire JFK team. But the JFK team had no loyalty to him, none whatsoever. And they all basically immediately were plotting against him, and primarily plotting to bring Bobby Kennedy. So he was destroyed by his own, in a way.
There's a famous film. I think it's called what is it? The JFK, the LBJ film that came out. There was one quick line title for it, and the way they presented it in the film is that Johnson was paranoid of the Kennedy family. He wasn't paranoid; it was real. The way they portrayed it was completely wrong.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
George was right. They were plotting Bobby's
immediately to replace him with Bobby. And he was real. I mean, that's exactly. I mean, it was that was the moment that broke Johnson. If you remember, yes, New Hampshire. He won New Hampshire, so he could have said, okay, he won New Hampshire. But what then happened is that within days, off New Hampshire, Bobby Kennedy announced that he was running, and that was what Johnson just couldn't face. He couldn't face running against Bobby, and that's when Johnson dropped out of the race. Yeah, I mean, he sealed his own fate by doing that. And people had told him, "Don't do it. You can't have the Kennedy team around you." John Connolly, said to him, "This is a terrible idea. You've got to bring in your own people, including, of course, John Connolly, who was a Johnson man,
who became a Republican.
Became a Republican. Yeah.
With the Nixon administration.
That's right.
You're no JFK. Said that to Dan Quayle. Remember that?
That's it. Yeah. Yes.
You're no JFK. Okay.
That's right.
All right, everybody. Enough of presidential
memories. Which is appropriate. We got 10 minutes before a new president is sworn in, so we're kind of very preoccupied with presidents.
The question will be: meet the new boss, same as the old boss. That's to be continued. All right, everybody. Exactly. This is the Gaggle with Peter and George. This is our weekly live stream. Exactly. If you want, enjoy the inauguration, enjoy the address. I will watch it because I'm going to talk about it tomorrow on my program. It is a historical event. Not everybody agrees with me, but Donald Trump is a world historic figure. He's
definitely
Lazarus. He's come back.
Absolutely, he will be the dominant figure of American politics when he goes. He will have been dominated American politics for almost 15 years. That's something. Anyway, thank you everybody. Thank you for joining us. We will be back doing our live stream next Monday at the same time, and then tomorrow, Tuesday, I'm going to do my solo 3 p.m. Eastern time. Please join me, and then we'll discuss the inaugural. There's Apple. He always shows up and don't forget the tip jar. The most important thing. Yeah, if you have any money in your pockets, feeling wealthy today, Apple's view is also that Bitcoin is good. If you got cyber, cryptocurrency, that's also good. Just put crypto, in it. That's also good. So remember, if you like the Gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye-bye.